remember when Doom emerged on the PC? I certainly do. It was a cold winter's evening in December 1993 when my eyes were almost burnt out of their sockets. With these TV presenters taking me for a laugh, it was like you could step into another world without even having to change out of your pants. This was everything I had dreamed I could want from a computer experience, everything and more. It felt beyond a computer game. This felt like it could be a life-changing experience. I swiftly looked across at my Commodore 64 and Sega Master System, and the situation dawned. This was completely out of my reach. Only billionaires could afford the type of technology that this game needed to run. Christ, even my school's best 386 systems could barely run Microsoft Word. This technology wasn't just out of my personal reach, it was outside my entire circle of reach. You see, progression of IBM PC Compatible hardware in the UK wasn't quite up to the same pace as our American friends. The UK had been brought up on low-cost TV-based microcomputing like the Sinclair Spectrum and Amstrad CPC. Fancy DOS-based machines were still a million miles away as UK school kids progressed from their 8-bit machines to the likes of the Amiga and Atari ST. After all, these machines had beaten the pants off DOS games for the best part of 10 years, and you could just whop them straight into a television. Who needed a fully fledged PC? Well, at that precise moment, I did. I absolutely and unequivocally required an IBM compatible personal computer immediately. I'd never needed one before, but I sure as hell did now. The reality was it would be another year before one of my friends got hold of a real PC, and then a further year before I got my own. We all know the wait was worth it, but in the meantime something had to be done. Clearly this feeling was felt by many more people than myself, because the next 3 years witnessed a plethora of Doom-style games designed for machines which, in all fairness, were nowhere near powerful enough to run them. But who gave a shit if you were faced with pixels the size of your face? As long as you were getting something akin to the Doom experience, anything would suffice. We just needed that fix. Thankfully, for Christmas that year, I received a Sega Mega Drive, so the stakes had upped. At that point, the Mega Drive already had first-person style games like Cybercop, but they missed the Doom style by some margin. The question is, was the Mega Drive up to the task of a true Doom clone? Well, the answer is no, not really. I mean, a few developers had a shot at it, and the end results on the whole were pretty darn good, but the machine just lacked the oomph to give you a cohesive Doom experience. Zero Tolerance was the first game which really caught my eye. A compelling review in Mean Machine Sega made me sit up and think, yes, this could be what I'm looking for. This could be that gateway to the FPS experience I craved. Now, you have to remember that these were pre-internet days, so all I had to go on was screenshots from a magazine, but the environments looked 3D, the sprites looked good, and the atmosphere seemed to be present. But I was niggled by the size of the viewing window. I mean, it's a Mega Drive, so sure, I expected it, but neither I or my paper round earnings were convinced it was where the true Doom experience lay. Also, this wasn't the kind of game you could just rent from your local Ritz video store. It would take a good few years for a game of this magnitude to be available in the rental system. Bloodshot was another attempt on Sega's 16-bit architecture, and to be frank, it upped the stakes in terms of viewport size considerably. Here was practically a full-screen display, combined with recognisable detailed sprites and textured walls. There was only one problem. I apparently knew nothing about this game at the time. It must have completely passed me by, because otherwise I would have been on it like a shot. I did acquire a copy a few years back, and it's pretty mind-blowing for the Mega Drive. I mean, sure, you haven't got the fully smooth scrolling which Doom does so well, but it does a mighty fine job of imitating that Doom feeling nonetheless. By this time it was about Christmas 1994, and Santa, the little tubby marvel, had acquired me a lovely little Atari ST. Doom had also managed to leap its way onto those new mind-blowing consoles such as the 3DO, the Atari Jaguar and Sega's 32X, although these always felt a bit late to the party, and I felt the Jaguar, with all its 64 bits, was above it, especially being blessed with the amazing Alien vs Predator, which whetted my appetite possibly more than Doom. So much so that I think I even refused to acknowledge its existence. But anyway, those consoles were also out of my reach, so what wonders did my new Atari ST system have in store for me in this epic saga? Well, My eyes lit up in early 1995 when I grabbed a copy of ST format with a playable demo of Substation. On the cover disc, whoa! Now here was an FPS game for my brand new machine, which although lacking a little bit of texture was everything I needed. I could gloss over the lack of colour, the lack of resolution, even the lack of gameplay. I just needed this almost virtual reality experience in my life. The only problem was it was for STE or Falcon machines only. My piddling little STFM didn't have the necessary custom chips to even try and get this to run, let alone the extra 512k needed. Even then, the game did have to make use of clever tricks like a floor and ceiling which are completely static, although the shading does help to hide this little trick. God damn it, so close, but yet so far. Incidentally, long after I moved on from the ST, 2 clones appear to have popped up, called Hellgate, which looks like... oh god, I don't even know what it looks like, and Destruction Imminent, which certainly scrolls at a good place for a 1meg ST, but what the hell is that? It looks like a bloody gingerbread man. Anyway, I think it was this close call which made me proclaim the need for another new machine just a few months after, for my birthday. That machine was the stubby but immense Amiga 600. Now, if you weren't a PC owner, then the Amiga was where it was at. These machines were still fairly well supported at this time. Christ, there was even 2 dedicated magazines for it in the newsagents. Thankfully, developers knew that there would be a big fan base for this kind of game on these machines, and so lots of Doom-style games were released for it. Sadly, however, most required the fricking AGA chipset, which was only available in the new and expensive Amiga 1200 and CD32 models. Ah! Still, there was one glimmer of hope for my 600 in the shape of Death Mask. Now, Apache Software clearly knew there would be a heap of pissed off non-AGA Amiga owners looking for a slice of Doom, so they made the smart move of releasing this little gem. Now, in terms of fluidity, it's a long way off the mark. Additionally, the screen is always split in 2. But you know what that means. Yep, split screen action. This was where the game shone. Doom was fantastic played over a network, and frankly Death Mask was fantastic in its own right on 2-player split screen mode. Even more key is that this game managed to capture a gloomy and dark atmosphere, so between playing this and frequent trips to my friend Michael's house, who had recently become a PC owner, everything was almost rosy. But Doom still wasn't truly in my grasp, and I continued to be drawn in by what seemed a multitude of new clones for the Amiga 1200 and CD32 throughout 1995. Now, I was firmly on the computer beats console mindset at this point, but let's not forget that Doom was actually released on the Super Nintendo this year too. The frickin' SNES! Just to rub salt into the wound, but at the same time a pretty staggering achievement on the Super FX 16-bit hardware, even with the letterboxing and in many ways better than even the 32X incarnation. Fears was one of the earliest and flattest FPS experiences to arrive on the Amiga. Developed by Bomb Software, it perhaps did bomb a little against its competitors, featuring a shotgun which had a particular and somewhat upsetting lack of recoil action when you fired, so much so that it kind of detached the whole experience for me. Call me picky, but it did supply you with full screen action, something which I found particularly impressive despite the low resolution graphics. Gloom was another 1995 release, and this is arguably the most famous, even if it's just in terms of a hand-clappingly good name. Frankly, this game is pretty much spot on. You can forgive the massive pixels in full screen mode, you can even forgive the sound effects which have been blatantly extracted illegally from Aliens. But that's mainly because they work pretty well. This game is Doom, but yet it's not. It manages to be what Doom is, with less resources, less memory and less potential profit, but yet somehow manages to be its own game. Also top marks for the cover art. I played it recently and was hooked for some considerable time. Alien Breed 3D is next. Now by this point Alien Breed was a well-established top-down shooter series on the Amiga, and it was ripe to be made into a first-person shooter. In fact, it would have been a crime had they not. Team 17 drew on their programming skill to create a very playable Doom-style game, which fitted the Alien Breed world like a glove, although the gun sound effects seemed to come from Star Wars more than anything else. It's true that most of the screen is taken up by a large HUD display, but we were accepting of this. After all, the Amiga had kicked ass over DOS games for so long, it was only fair to let the new 486 processors outshine in capabilities, especially for the cost. Both Alien Breed 3D and Gloom spawned improved sequels, with Alien Breed 3D 2 in particular being a massive improvement over the original. These games eased the tension for non-Doom owners and really started to make use of the Amiga's AGA chipset. There were also releases such as Behind the Iron Gate, Citadel, Monster and Breathless, not to mention games like Nemac 4, which really thrived under the high-powered Amiga systems. But by 1996, things had started to change, and 3D technology was progressing at what seemed a rapid pace. New consoles like the PlayStation and Saturn landed, which seemed like they could almost run Doom in their sleep, and games like Dark Forces and Descent had already arrived on PC, and Duke Nukem 3D was imminent.
Damn, I'm looking good.
Not to mention Quake. But more importantly, things were looking much rosier for me. Doom was here! I had opened up my first IBM Compatible PC for Christmas 1995, and Doom, albeit the shareware version, was finally in my reach. I didn't have a sound card, I didn't care, I had Doom. I could run Doom, Doom was now my life, almost literally. And in a way, it remains my life up until this day. Every time I see it, I get a fuzzy feeling of excitement that only Doom, a 486 processor and a VGA CRT screen can reproduce. I could happily play the first few levels over and over again, possibly never ending, and still not lose this deep excitement. Incidentally, the first time I managed to play Doom at my friend's on his spanking new IBM Colossus machine, it was everything I'd hoped for and more. I think we spent most evenings after school just taking it in turns absorbed in this alien landscape, still wondering how it was possible, whilst ever more affirming my need to own this hardware, this game and this experience. It's something I will never shake off. Doom was and remains a masterpiece of gaming history and a massive part of my life. Doom for life, baby! Thank you for watching my recollections of Doom's clones. I've got plenty more videos, and I've got another video similar to this lined up, so feel free to subscribe, watch a different video, or even contribute to my Patreon channel. In any case, thank you for watching and good night.